Prince William had entered the private archive expecting a routine review of family correspondence. Instead, one sealed message changed the temperature of the monarchy in seconds. The handwriting was unmistakable. The recipient was his father. And as William reached the final lines of Diana's hidden message to Charles, grief turned into something colder. Because the future king suddenly believed Camilla knew far more than she had ever admitted. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had expected old letters and the silence of history. Only one archive officer remained beside him when an envelope was placed on the table. The restricted archive, a secure collection for royal papers kept apart from ordinary records, rarely offered surprises. Yet Diana's handwriting cut through him instantly. He opened the message and found Charles named as its recipient. The warning was clear: personal loyalty must never erase the emotional truth of what happened inside their marriage. The prince stopped breathing for a moment. He read the passage again slowly, because the words mattered for two reasons. His mother had written directly about truth and memory, and she had tied that truth to the future of her sons. William had grown up believing every private record had been accounted for. This message was absent from the ordinary correspondence index, the catalog used to trace stored letters. Someone had kept it outside the story he knew. William reached the final sentence and sat motionless. His hands trembled as he folded the page once. Grief pulled him toward Diana, but anger pushed him toward Charles. Why had the king never spoken of this? Why had his father allowed years to pass while the message remained buried? Then Camilla entered his thoughts, and his pain sharpened. If the queen consort had known, her silence had touched his life too. The archive notation changed everything. William found a handwritten record showing the envelope had been removed years earlier during a private review linked to correspondence from Charles and Camilla's household. He leaned closer. Beside the date sat one initial, a return time, and 3 words: acknowledged privately. That phrase was enough. Someone beyond his father had understood the contents. William slid the message into a plain folder. He dismissed the officer, asked for Camilla's exact location, and stood with a new terrible calm. No aides, no secretaries, no warning through Charles. He would ask her himself. And as William closed the archive door behind him, the question was no longer whether Diana's message had survived. It was who had spent years hoping he would never read it. This was never just about paper. For William, the message carried the voice of a mother he had lost before he was old enough to ask her the hardest questions. For Charles, it carried the weight of a marriage that had become history before its wounds had fully closed. And for Camilla, Diana's words threatened to reopen the one chapter of royal life she had spent years learning to survive. William moved through the corridor, with the folder held tightly against his side. The prince had inherited countless public memories of Diana, but this was different. This message gave him her private voice, direct and unfiltered, and that mattered because she had written about truth before her sons were old enough to understand what had happened. He had spent years protecting her memory. Now he feared someone else had been controlling it. The future king stopped outside Camilla's rooms and opened the folder again. One line pulled him back immediately. Diana had wanted Charles to understand that silence could shape their sons as deeply as scandal. William read it twice. The king existed in his heart as 2 men. The father who remained after tragedy, and the husband forever tied to his mother's pain. Loving one did not erase the other. That conflict made every word harder to carry. Camilla received the message that William was approaching alone and felt her stomach tighten. The queen consort, the wife of the reigning monarch, understood instantly that an unaccompanied visit meant this was personal. She set down her tea without drinking it, straightened the same cushion twice, then forced her hands still. She had survived years of public judgment. Yet the past felt different when it arrived through Diana's son. William paused once more before entering. Part of him wanted Camilla to give him a simple answer, a mistake, a forgotten record, anything that would make the anger unnecessary. But another part had already reached a darker conclusion. If she had known, then silence itself had been a choice. The door opened. Camilla looked toward him, and William saw her expression change before a single word was spoken. Her eyes dropped to the old archive folder, a secured file used to hold restricted royal correspondence, then returned quickly to his face, too quickly. The prince felt his anger sharpen. The queen felt fear rise. Charles was nowhere in the room. The man Diana had addressed still did not know the message had been found, leaving William and Camilla alone with a history neither could escape. William closed the door himself. He refused the chair she offered, and placed the folder against his side. Then he asked, quietly, "When did you first know my mother had written to him?" Camilla's answer would matter, but not nearly as much as the memory she had spent years refusing to name. Years before William opened the archive folder, one dinner had quietly changed everything. There were no photographers, no public statements, and no dramatic departures. Yet by the end of that night at Balmoral, Diana had understood that Charles was no longer merely avoiding the emotional truth between them. In her mind, he had made a choice. And before dawn, she began the message William would one day discover. Diana had reached the final stage of a marriage, where every conversation felt measured. She and Charles still spoke about duty, family, and their sons, but trust had thinned into caution. Balmoral, the royal family's private Scottish residence, gave them distance from public pressure, yet it offered no escape from the damage between them. Camilla remained the unspoken force behind that damage, because her place in the prince's emotional life made every discussion with his wife feel crowded by someone who was not in the room. The dinner began quietly. Diana watched Charles avoid her eyes, then asked the question she had carried for months. Would he promise that William and Harry would one day be told the truth about how their parents' marriage had collapsed? She did not ask for revenge. She wanted their sons to understand that pain had existed on both sides. Charles stayed silent. Then the prince answered, "Some truths do more damage when inherited." Diana felt the sentence land like a verdict. She stood, pushed her chair back, and left without another argument. In that moment, she believed Charles had chosen the monarchy's version of events over her own voice. The future mattered, because William and Harry would eventually grow into men carrying public memories of their mother, while knowing almost nothing about what she had privately feared. Charles remained at the table alone. He was shaken, but he did not follow her. The prince told himself restraint would prevent another confrontation. Diana saw something colder. To her, his refusal to come after her proved that silence had become his defense. Before sunrise, Diana began writing. She addressed the message directly to Charles. It was not a love letter, and not an accusation. It was a warning. One day, William might judge all of them less for what they had suffered, and more for what they had concealed. Then she added a line about, "The woman who already knows why I am writing this." Years later, William would read those words and think immediately of Camilla. Charles later mentioned in a private conversation that Diana had written something for the future. Camilla felt an immediate chill, but she asked nothing. Much later, during a correspondence review, the Queen Consort saw enough of the message to understand exactly what Diana had feared. And she still chose not to tell William. So when William demanded the truth face to face, Camilla was not being asked about a forgotten letter. She was being asked about the choice she made after finding it. William did not shout when the confrontation began. That made it worse. He stood across from Camilla with Diana's message between them, and spoke with the controlled precision of a man terrified of what anger might make him say. Camilla tried to explain the past. He refused the comfort of generalities. Then the prince placed one finger on the archive notation and delivered the accusation she had feared from the moment he entered. William laid the folder on the small table and turned the archive record toward her. The notation, a handwritten entry showing when a restricted royal document was removed and returned, sat clearly beside the old date. He did not look away. "You recognized this before I spoke, so don't tell me you knew nothing." Camilla stared at the page, then back at him. The Queen Consort knew denial would only deepen the wound. Camilla admitted the truth through that private conversation. She had become aware of Diana's message during a correspondence review years earlier. She insisted she had never possessed it, never destroyed it, and never asked anyone to hide it from William. The Queen spoke carefully, but the prince heard caution as distance. He pushed the chair beside him backward and demanded why she had never told him that his mother had left words tied directly to the future understanding of her sons. William's anger broke through. He told Camilla this mattered because Diana had not written about an abstract royal dispute. She had written about William and Harry, about what they might one day believe, and about the damage silence could leave behind. Camilla answered that she believed the message belonged to Charles and Diana. The prince cut in immediately. The moment she knew it concerned his future, he said, her silence became a decision involving him. Camilla finally stopped defending herself. She told William that Charles had read the message years earlier. According to her documented account of that private correspondence review, the king had sat alone with Diana's page for nearly an hour. He had been shattered. Then the monarch ordered the letter returned to restricted storage, a protected holding system for private royal papers, and made Camilla promise never to raise it with William unless he chose to do so himself. William turned away. The prince closed his eyes as the shape of his anger changed. Camilla watched him carefully and understood the confrontation had moved beyond her. Charles had known. His father had read every word and still chosen silence. William lifted the folder from the table. "You protected his silence," he told Camilla. "Now he can explain it." Camilla had survived William's accusation, but the truth she gave him had redirected every ounce of his anger toward Charles. The monarchy could control access cards, archive classifications, and private correspondence, but it could not control what William now felt. Diana's message had escaped every system built around it, not because someone leaked it, but because her own son had finally opened the right folder. And when Charles learned what William had discovered, the king understood immediately that royal authority could not protect him from the conversation he had postponed for years. Charles had always held the emotional control over the message, because Diana had addressed it directly to him. Restricted correspondence, private family letters, kept away from ordinary palace access, had allowed the king to treat the matter as personal rather than public. That distinction mattered. William had never been formally denied the truth. He had simply never been invited into it. Camilla knew the message existed, but the monarch had been the one who decided silence should continue. Then the note arrived. Charles read William's handwriting once. "I have read it. We speak tonight." The king lowered himself into a chair without answering the aide waiting beside him. He felt shame before anger could even form. Diana's warning had come true through his own delay. William was no longer judging only a broken marriage. The prince was judging every year his father had chosen not to speak. William felt the same conflict from the opposite side. He remembered Charles standing beside him after grief, supporting him through duty, and sharing moments that had belonged only to father and son. The future king loved that man, yet Diana's message had forced him to confront another version of his father, one capable of carrying her words for years while saying nothing. Charles opened a locked drawer and removed a private memorandum, a personal written record used to preserve thoughts and decisions not meant for public release. The king had written it after first reading Diana's message. One entry said William was too young. Another claimed the prince had just married and deserved peace. Later, Charles blamed the weight of royal duty. Then came the final entry. The monarch had written the truth plainly. He feared William would ask whether Diana had been right. Worse, he did not know how to answer without condemning himself. Charles removed his signet ring, the personal seal linked to his royal identity, and placed it beside the memorandum. He told his private secretary that William would enter alone. No advisors, no Camilla. The door opened. William stepped inside with the folder. Charles looked at his son and did not offer an excuse. "Your mother expected this day." And with that confession, the confrontation William thought he understood became something far more painful. A father finally admitting he had always known judgment was coming. The fallout began before William and Charles finished speaking. One closed door inside the royal residence created a new emotional reality. Camilla was no longer the person standing beside the king, as he confronted his most painful history. She was outside it, alone. And as the private conversation stretched beyond an hour, the Queen understood that Diana's hidden message had achieved something no public controversy ever had. It had forced father and son into a truth neither could delegate. Charles had given one clear instruction before William entered. No one was to interrupt them, including Camilla. The king understood why that boundary mattered. Diana's message concerned the monarch, his former wife, and their son before it touched the wider royal household, the network of family and staff surrounding the sovereign. For once, he could not place duty between himself and the prince. He had to answer as a father. Camilla sat alone in the adjoining room and removed her reading glasses. She placed them carefully on the table, then stared toward the closed door. The Queen felt humiliated by being excluded, especially when she believed the original silence had belonged to Charles. Yet guilt complicated her anger. William had been right about one painful point. She had known enough to speak, and she had chosen not to. William faced his father with none of the restraint he had shown earlier. The prince told Charles that protection had only made the discovery more brutal. He would rather have been wounded by Diana's words years ago than comforted by an omission he never agreed to. The future king needed the truth, because his mother's message concerned how he would understand his own family. Silence had taken that choice from him. Charles lowered his voice. The king admitted he had feared losing William emotionally after Diana's death. Every passing year made the message harder to reveal. The monarch kept waiting for a safer time, but safety became delay, and delay became secrecy. Then William asked the question that changed everything. Had Camilla been part of the Balmoral conversation Diana remembered? Charles answered no. The king revealed through their private recorded family conversation that Diana had spoken with Camilla weeks before writing the message. He never learned every word exchanged, but Diana returned unusually calm. Later, she told him, at least she did not pretend not to understand. William went still. The prince left Charles shaken, but his anger no longer moved in a straight line. Instead of storming back toward Camilla, he sent a private request. He wanted to speak with the Queen again. This time, Diana's message would not sit between them. The first confrontation had been driven by anger. The second would be far more dangerous, because William was finally ready to listen. There were no secretaries in the room, no king, no archive file. William and Camilla sat opposite each other, with nothing between them except the past. And for the first time that day, the prince did not accuse her. He asked her to remember. Camilla hesitated. Then she told him about a private conversation with Diana that Charles had never heard, and one sentence from that meeting finally changed William's understanding of the hidden message. William kept his voice calm as he asked what Diana had said weeks before the Balmoral dinner. The prince understood why the answer mattered. His mother's message had shaped his anger, while Camilla's silence had made her appear part of a deliberate deception. Yet he now knew Charles had never heard the full conversation. The king had only seen its emotional aftermath. Somewhere inside that missing exchange lay the meaning of Diana's most troubling line. Camilla folded her hands tightly. The queen consort, the title used for the reigning king's wife, looked directly at William and described the private conversation through her personal documented account of that meeting. Diana had asked one question. "When my boys are men, will you let them believe I imagined all of this?" William said nothing. Camilla admitted the words had stunned her. She told Diana no. The queen had understood the pain was real, even if she could never undo her own part in causing it. She had not defended herself during that conversation. She had not told Diana she was mistaken. And now William struggled with the confession, because the woman he had entered ready to condemn was describing a moment of painful honesty. Camilla finally explained the hidden phrase. The woman who already knows had not been a threat. Diana was referring to the promise made during their private exchange. Her suffering would never be dismissed as fantasy. The queen then admitted something harder. When she later discovered the message, Charles asked for secrecy, but fear also kept her silent. She believed William would see any explanation from her as manipulation. William lowered his eyes. Anger gave way to sadness. The prince told Camilla that fear could explain silence, but it could not erase the consequences. She accepted his judgment without resistance. Then William made his position clear. He would not punish her for Diana's message, but he would never again accept being protected from family history that directly concerned him. Camilla nodded. William rose with one final decision already forming. He would return to Charles and demand a permanent change. Diana's message could remain private from the world, but it would never again remain hidden from her sons. For the first time, William was no longer searching for someone to blame. He was deciding what truth would look like from that day forward. By morning, the private earthquake had reached the gates. The public did not know every word Diana had written, but it knew enough. William had discovered a hidden message to Charles and confronted Camilla after learning she was aware of its existence. The story crossed Britain with astonishing speed. Yet one image outside Kensington Palace captured the national mood better than any headline: a mother placing 2 handwritten notes beside Diana's gates, one for each son. The palace confirmed the message in a formal communication, but refused to release Diana's private words in full. Palace communications, official statements used to explain royal matters to the public, acknowledged that William had recently reviewed the correspondence. That confirmation mattered because the message concerned his own childhood, his mother's pain, and the silence surrounding both. Britain immediately began asking whether royal children should ever be shielded from family records that directly shape their lives. Outside Kensington Palace, the debate suddenly became painfully human. A small crowd watched as one mother approached the gates and placed 2 white envelopes beneath them. One read William, the other read Harry. Broadcasters replayed the moment throughout the afternoon because the gesture captured what arguments could not. Diana's bond with her sons still shaped how people understood her story. The evening bulletin struck even harder. One major broadcast opened with the words, "A mother's words, a son's discovery, and a royal silence finally broken." William watched part of the coverage alone. The prince disliked seeing private grief become national drama, but when the 2 envelopes appeared, he fell silent. His mother's message had remained hidden for years. Now strangers were grieving the lost conversation with him. Camilla faced renewed hostility, yet she refused to issue a personal defense. The Queen told Charles in a private recorded conversation that speaking publicly would place her voice over Diana's message again. The king understood. Then he made his own decision. Charles authorized a formal statement accepting responsibility for restricting the correspondence. The monarch made clear that the choice had been his, not Camilla's. For the first time, he allowed the public weight of that silence to rest where William believed it belonged. William responded with action. The future king approved a private family protocol, a written process requiring reasons and later review when personal historical material concerning living relatives is withheld from them. No family document touching someone's own life could simply disappear into indefinite silence again. That evening, William returned to Diana's message one final time. He was no longer searching for another secret. He was deciding what her words required of him. The nation had turned Diana's message into a story about the past, but William understood its final meaning was about what he chose to do next. In the end, Diana's hidden message did not remove a queen, break a crown, or destroy a father and son. It did something quieter and more lasting. It forced William, Charles, and Camilla to stand before the same painful history without the protection of distance. The prince had entered the archive believing he had discovered a secret about his mother. What he truly discovered was the damage caused when love, guilt, and fear are allowed to hide behind silence. William read Diana's message one final time and felt the anger settle into something heavier. The prince understood why the decision mattered. His mother's words concerned real pain, but turning them into public ammunition against Charles or Camilla would reduce her private truth to another royal weapon. He chose privacy. The message would remain protected, not hidden from those it concerned, but shielded from anyone seeking revenge in Diana's name. The future king finally understood the difference. Diana had wanted truth preserved, not punishment without end. William could honor her without denying what happened, and he could remember her suffering without allowing that suffering to destroy every relationship that survived it. For years, grief had asked him to choose sides. Now he chose honesty instead. Charles faced his son directly and apologized. The king admitted in their private family conversation that he had confused delay with protection. He had waited for the perfect moment to speak, until silence itself became the greater wound. William did not pretend the hurt disappeared. The prince simply accepted the apology for what it was. Accountability offered too late, but offered honestly. William later spoke with Camilla again. He told the queen that he finally understood why Diana had called her the woman who already knows. Yet understanding another person's pain created responsibility. Silence still carried consequences. Camilla accepted his judgment without argument, and she did not ask him to forgive more than he was ready to forgive. William returned to the archive folder. The archive review record, a written log showing who examined restricted family material and when, remained open beside Diana's message. He wrote his name, then the date. Beneath the old notation, he added one sentence: "Read by her son. Her meaning understood." That decision changed how private family correspondence would be handled. William insisted that royal stability could never depend on hiding emotional history from the people most shaped by it. Diana's words had exposed no single villain. Charles's fear, Camilla's silence, and William's grief had all caused pain. But secrecy had come closest to dividing them. William closed the folder without suspicion controlling him, and without demanding that Charles explain the past perfectly. He chose a harder peace built on honesty, accountability, and the refusal to repeat their silence. Diana's message had waited years to be understood, and when William finally closed the folder, the past did not disappear, but for the first time, it no longer controlled the room. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.